We will get started here in just 1 minute, 60 seconds. Plenty of time to grab a cup of coffee or whatever you need. We'll get started in 1 minute. And Patricia, I had to go ahead and throw Spears logo on there too. I tried to make it smaller than your logo, but, but I was like, hey, you know what? Copy paste.
It's okay. It's no biggie. You're doing all the heavy lifting for me.
Well, no, you did the heavy lifting. You're the one that did put it all together.
No, you don't realize how much heavy lifting you're doing for me. So thank you.
Well, I just hope that we can combine it with some field training and some QA, QC, and really dotting the I's and crossing the T's and make sure that the intent of this energy code is a reality in the field. I have a feeling it is most of the time. I did have a raider send me a picture the other day, a house in Austin without sheathing whatsoever. Tyvek was the only exterior air barrier. It was stud Tyvek siding. And I was just wondering, that house would have a really hard time passing a blower door test on a legitimate test, I would think. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us, everyone, this morning. We are going to be keeping Austin energy efficient. Starting on Wednesday, homes permitted in the city of Austin will be required to meet the new 2021 IECC as adopted and amended by the city of Austin. We'll be talking about that all day today. Today we have myself, Jason Vandiver, a building code program manager for SPEAR, and Patricia Chawla was nice enough to put this presentation together and knows way more about Austin's energy code than I ever will, but you will have the misfortune of listening to me most of the time. We'll have Patricia chime in when I take us off the rails, when and if I do. Known Patricia for, gosh, a good long almost about 6-7 years now. We met actually at the North Central Texas Council of Governments Energy Code and Green Advisory Board. She was back in the energy business back then as well, working for Fox Energy. So she's been in the game a long time, and I know personally has a passion for energy efficiency. She was, I didn't know whether or not to give her congratulations or condolences when she was selected to be on the new energy code as it moves to a standard. So she is on that committee residentially, right? Patricia, you're on the residential committee.
That's correct. Just the residential.
Right on. And then I'm a recovering building official, 6 years clean, no red tags issued. Thank you very much. Now I'm a tree hugging hippie working for an energy efficiency nonprofit. But I kind of understand both sides. I grew up framing houses in the Plano area, so I try to mend together those three perspectives of, hey, wore the tool belt, drove the nails, it's hot out here in Texas summers, versus written the red tags, know the codes, was a building official, and then now let's save a little energy and get things built right. And one nice thing about Austin is they like to push the envelope a little bit. As you'll see as we get into the meat of the presentation, there's nothing crazy. We're not talking about R60 walls or passive house building requirements or anything like that. It's really just energy code. I wouldn't even call it plus. It's just a few what I would consider make sense amendments, and then a few Austin specific amendments. But the whole idea of, I try to get a little better in my job every day. I'm sure Patricia does as well. I'm sure most of you folks do as well. And the idea from a lot of times the building community is, oh, we just want to keep building houses the way we've always built them. And no, we're going to get a little better. And to get a little better on the energy efficiency side, one of the key drivers would be the energy code. So that's what we'll be talking about residentially today. Little housekeeping before we get started. Those of you needing AIA credits, if we do have any architects on the board, let's go ahead and get the learning objectives up so y'all can read those while I'm blabbing a little bit. Just reach out to Patricia and she can help you with the AIA. I doubt we have any or many of those. Probably most raters and or code officials and or builders, any of you folks that need ICC CEUs, Spear is a preferred provider. So simply fill out the course evaluation after the presentation and you will get ICC CEUs. Along with the course evaluation, I will send a PDF of this presentation, so no need to take notes. You'll get a PDF of the presentation. There's a few embedded hyperlinks in there. You will also get a really handy front back energy code fact sheet. Just kind of summarizes tells the whys, the whens, the wheres that Patricia put together about the new code for Austin. And then I'll also go ahead and include a PDF of the ordinance itself. So all of that will come with the course evaluation. Simply fill that out. You will get your ICC CEUs. I put this slide in every presentation I give, and I leave it in Spanish on purpose. And whether you're an inspector or a rater or a builder or whoever you may be on the webinar today, I'd like to thank you for the job you do. And really what I'm telling you is don't underestimate the importance of the job you do. I know certainly, Friday afternoon, I was pretty notorious. You had a lot better chance of getting a green tag from me if I was in a good mood on Friday afternoon, right? Because frankly, green tags are easier. But if it's, if you're letting people, cut some corners on the energy code side, an extra $10 or $20 a month in a utility bill might not matter all that much to you or I. But think about a single mom trying to feed their kids or a little old couple on a fixed income, $10, $20, $30, $40 a month, every single month can make a big difference. So don't underestimate the importance of the job you guys do. I appreciate it. So those are just kind of a 101 on the codes. All the codes, the plumbing code tells you how to plumb a house. The mechanical code tells you how to do the HVAC, and the National Electric Code, the wiring, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the energy code is a part of a group of codes that the ICC develops on a 3-year cycle. I'd love to see it every 5 years. It seems like right about the time I figure out what's going on, there's new ones coming out. 5 years would give me a little more chance, but hey, they don't listen to me, and that's fine. And basically what the energy code is, where the plumbing code tells you how to plumb it, the energy code tells you how to build a building such that it's not an energy pig. The verbiage from the code, the effective use and conservation of energy over the useful life of each building. As I mentioned earlier, the next code cycle, the 2024 ICC, will be developed through the new standards process, the ANSI standards process. Lots of folks that run in the circles, which I do, which the pro efficiency, tree hug, and hippie types were just devastated that it was moving to a standard. They always going to take the governmental votes, the governmental voices out of the code process. And me personally, I've always thought it might even actually be a good idea. And when I've looked at Patricia and the other folks that have applied and been accepted to that standards development process, to me, it makes a whole lot more sense. And I think we're going to end up with a better code. And also ICC incorporated, what was the exact language that they incorporated on that, Patricia, as far as, there's some, the language, something about it, it's more of a climate or a energy.
Yeah. They updated the scope so that more code can go into the energy code that's more aggressive towards climate change. That might not be directly applicable to the design and construction of buildings. So like electric vehicles or electrification, and maybe some other items that yet haven't been thought of, but
that's right. Yeah. And that came about through the contesting of the handful of amendments in the 2021, where eventually the ICC said, okay, EV and solar ready, so that makes sense. And just a little here, a little side note here, the CDP access hyperlink here, you have until October 12th, if I'm not mistaken, right here, through October 12th. So there is an open comment period available until the 12th for the 2024 IECC. I actually had one of the first and only code change amendment I ever submitted came in on the 2021. Simply, that was on the little certificate on the electric panel. You now in the 2021 also have to include the code edition under which it was permitted and the compliance path, which I think are important things. If we're given the building thermal envelope criteria, why don't we give that as well? And that's now in the 2021. So, and this is an important
Jason,
slide. Yeah, go ahead.
Jason, let me just say one more thing about the committee. As has been expressed in the meeting so far, there's just been one orientation meeting, but there's another meeting this afternoon that anybody can participate. It's not just code officials, not just builders, but anybody on the street can participate. And they will be creating some work groups around whatever code proposals that are submitted, and anybody can participate in those work groups as well. So if you're interested, I definitely encourage you to get involved, and you can reach out to me once I know more information. I think we'll be finding out more information this afternoon. I can pass that along, and you can definitely encourage you to get involved.
I had to mute real quick. My cat was driving me crazy. All right, let's keep going. And this is, and I talk about this quite a bit, and as far as leveraging partnerships, you know, if we're going to build homes better, we can't just the builder himself. I mean, he can't just make all of that. I mean, you probably are going to need to get a little more involved with your energy code experts and your HERS raters, and with the city of Austin, you know, requiring the manual J's and the air balancing and the ventilation testing, which it comes in with the 2021, you know, a more interaction with your HVAC contractor and getting on the same page on the front end, you know, on the planning side, you know, are we going to leave them plenty of room? And then, you know, the framers as well. Okay, are we going to do some advanced framing to make our to help our performance path compliance? And I, you know, HERS raters, if I have a bunch of HERS raters in any of my classes, and I teach classes all over Texas and Oklahoma all the time, you know, yeah, a HERS rater, he might be showing up to do the insulation inspection, you know, to do the insulation inspection and air barrier inspection. Well, if you're a HERS rater and you notice that they're missing head flashing on a couple of the windows, or you notice they have some reverse shingling on the weather resistive barrier, or you know whatever it may be, you know, the builder's number one source of litigation is water intrusion. And yeah, you're not there to look at the flashing details, but if you notice, you know, something amiss, you know, that's adding value to your builders. And it's all about, you know, leveraging those partnerships, adding value, and ultimately it's adding value to the homeowner as well. Because, you know, I can't tell you, and I'm not going to divulge the city, but I've done several field trainings in the last few years, and there's a lot of new homes being built that the weather resistive barrier details are such that they're going to have some pretty significant sheathing and mold issues pretty quick. And a lot of times that weather resistive barrier, it's just missed. The city inspector thinks that maybe the rater's looking at it. The rater maybe thinks the city's looking at it. And a lot of times no one's looking at it. And as a builder, you know, if we have any builders on the webinar today, you don't want to be in a lawsuit, right? And water intrusion is I mean, I would maybe include that in the scope of work with your rater. So just some things to think about, leveraging partnerships. Do you have anything else to add on that one, Patricia?
Nope, I think that summed it up. We included a link to the Green Building website and to the building technical codes on DSD's website to get more familiar with either the AGB program or the codes themselves, because there's links therein. But yeah, those people are there on the site all the time. Those are the local experts they definitely need to be known that they're part of the team, and that they don't fear that to speak out will have some kind of retribution when overall it's going to improve the quality of your product.
Exactly. Amen. Okay, so a little bit about the structure of the IECC. So the IECC-R just is simply referring to the residential chapters of the residential portion of the IECC. So what book do we even need? Well, if you're building a house, you could really use one of these two. You pick or choose. It is the residential chapters are a carbon copy of Chapter 11 of the IRC. That the IRC the idea behind the IRC was, hey, this is the one and only one book that you will need to completely construct all 1 and 2 family dwellings, group R2, R3, R4, and townhomes. So supposedly out of the 2021, you can construct all those and get them done. I typically am looking at the residential chapter of the IECC just because that's what I typically go to. But again, Chapter 11 of the IRC is the residential IECC. Now, Austin has a handful of local amendments. I mean, you can see these are all commercial amendments here as designated by the C. And, you know, when House Bill 1736 came along, which made the 2015 Energy Code the minimum code for the state of Texas, it basically said, you know, cities in non-attainment areas, you cannot amend the code to be less stringent. But the state of Texas has always allowed local jurisdictions to amend the code to make it more stringent, basically more energy efficient. So, you know, this allows Austin, I know San Antonio's got a handful of them. I just did a presentation on the 2021 energy code for Victoria a few months ago. They have a handful of amendments. Just it gives local jurisdictions a little more flexibility to, hey, we can do what we want with this as far as making it more efficient. You know, I know if I ever fall off the wagon and become a building official again, there are a handful of more stringent amendments that I would certainly make to the energy code. Handful that I'd add into the IRC as well. I'm not a big fan of plasticized cardboard as a weather resistant barrier, but we won't badmouth TPLI quite yet. So those of you that don't know about what the energy code, so what is the energy code? Well, it's basically a set of requirements for the things that use energy in a building. And does a wall use energy? No, but a wall allows that heat transfer through it. So it causes more energy to be used by heating and cooling. Well, do we need the same sort of wall and ceiling assembly in Montana that we do in Austin? No, we don't. And so what this map does, it's based on weather data. And basically what it says is that, hey, we're going to have requirements specific to the parts of the country in which these homes and these commercial buildings are built. Starting in the 2018 energy code, I believe it was, they started referencing the ASHRAE climate zone map, which this one is one climate zone map out of date. The reason I can tell that is you look down here at Key West, it's climate zone 1. Well, in the 2021 energy code, these 3 counties down here in the bottom of Texas, McAllen, Brownsville, this area down here, that has moved to climate zone 1. And then up here, Tarrant, Dallas, there's 7 counties in the DFW area that are now in climate zone 2. And it's simply a reflection of we're getting a little warmer as we go. But the gist of it, and you'll notice this semi-vertical looking line here, that will differentiate between our moist, humid, and then we've got warm, humid below here. So, and then these are dry areas here. And it's all, you know, you need more insulation in Montana than you do in Austin. And that's basically the gist of what I get out of the climate zone map. Now, again, this is just real kind of simple Energy Code 101. So Energy Code 101 says, hey, here's the climate zone. And then it'll give you a table of, you know, whether, and we'll get to the tables here shortly, but it'll give you a table saying, here's the efficiency of your building. Here's what it needs to meet, whether it be R49 for the ceiling or R15 for the wall or whatever it may be. And then how to get there. So there's 3 different ways to get there, kind of 3.5 or 4. So prescriptive, which is basically, hey, that straight line, right? A straight road, you follow these numbers, you follow these numbers without exception, and you get there. Now, there might be a little jog down here in this road that you can't quite see, and that's with the UA option. So you can rob Peter to pay Paul a little bit in the building thermal envelope, but you have to use a calculator to show how you do it. There's a straight prescriptive that does allow some deviations from the exact numbers, but it's based on a total square footage. So maybe like in the ceiling, for example, you can reduce up to 500 square feet from R49 to R38. Or in fenestration, for example, or maybe a door, you're allowed up to 24 square feet of door that doesn't meet the U factor. So there's a handful of caveats to the prescriptive path, but for the most part, it is a straight road. You do it exactly what we tell you, you're good to go. Performance path, that's also going to, rather than worrying about what your building thermal envelope is, well, building performance path is going to worry about that, but it's also going to include HVAC and service water heating use. So maybe you get a little more efficient HVAC, you get a little more efficient, more compact service water heating. You might want to look at the performance path. It gives the builders a little more flexibility. You know, it's curved road, pretty plants. And then the ERI path, heck, you can get extra credit for an Energy Star dishwasher. You basically, it's similar to hers, but hers is it's proprietary and is based on an ANSI standard. It's updated continuously, and code isn't. You know, the new code will hopefully more align ERI and hers. But right now we're seeing hers scores about 6-7 points lower than ERI. So if, as a code official or as a rater, you know, if you're turning in a hers score for code compliance, you shouldn't be. You should be make sure you're using an ERI score. And Patricia, feel free to jump in if you want to add or correct at any time. So talking about the first path, the prescriptive path. So this is the most similar to the other codes where, you know, the sheathing fastener requirements would be 4 inches on the perimeter and 8 inches in the field, you know, maximum spacing. It's just it's a prescriptive, it's a ABC, it's, you know, rust protective paint, it's 1/2 inch or greater, it's whatever it may be, it's a very specific. So there will be, and this is from the 2015 Austin Code. I'm assuming it must be because it's listed prescriptive, and that's no longer called out in the 2021. And we'll talk about some of that rearrangement in the code here in just a second. But just keep in mind on the prescriptive part, can you please confirm that the HERS report can, you know, so yes, the HERS, now you can use a HERS report, back to the HERS, we talked about ERI and HERS and the difference. You can still use the HERS report. You can still use Ecotrope or RemRate or whatever software it is you're using and have a HERS score, give the builder a HERS score. But as far as code compliance, you will want to make sure and use the ERI number, not the HERS number for code compliance. But as far as using it to comply with the code, that's an absolute perfectly legitimate pathway through the code. So this has been this way in the prescriptive path for a while as far as ceiling insulation. I remember when we went from the 06 to the 09 and went from R30 to R38, at least in climate zone 3. I don't remember for sure if they bumped that up in climate zone 2 or not, but you could reduce. So this basically ceilings with attic spaces here. Hey, if you can do a raised heel energy truss Well, instead of in the 2021 code, you're required R49 in the ceiling. Well, if you can do a raised hill energy truss and get a full R38 all the way over the edge of the top plate at the eaves, well, you're allowed that reduction in ceiling insulation. And back in the older codes, you know, where R30 was required, and you had some vault ceilings, you were allowed to go to R19 in the vault. Now you could conceivably, I think it's a terrible idea. You could conceivably go down to R19 in the vault. I mean, to me, you would want at least an R5 continuous insulation above the rafters if you're going to do that. But you know, you can calculate that in your total UA calculations if you have less than this 100% prescriptive requirement. But it's going to be a UA calculation. And Ecotrope, and now it's not out yet with Austin amendments, but it should be out soon. And then IC3 also should be out soon to do these calculations for you. So now IC3 doesn't do total UA calculations though. That's a performance calculator. So really Ecotrope would be your best bet for the total UA alternative calculations. ResCheck does it as well, but I don't believe ResCheck is going to incorporate Austin's amendment. So you're probably going to be looking at Ecotrope to do the total UA calculations. Yeah, so Patricia did a little example. Basically, so on the performance path and on the ERI, you're looking at the standard, basically what's called a standard design and proposed design. And there's big charts showing, it breaks it walls, ceiling, floors, ventilation, surface water heating. There's all these different categories. And then the middle category will be the standard design, which basically, you know, for ceiling, the standard design, it's based on a U number, but we're all more comfortable with R numbers. I mean, we don't think of U, or at least I don't think of U's when I'm thinking about wall and ceiling insulation. I'm thinking about R38 or R49 for ceiling. I'm thinking about R13, R15, R19 for walls. U is simply the inverse of R. But as far as the calculators are concerned, they will always use U values. And basically the way this works is proposed design, pretty simple. That's how I propose to build the home. Okay. Well, standard design is going to take that R49 ceiling, that R15 wall, whatever the wall is, whatever the ceiling is, whatever the different components are, it's going to take the minimum code values, and those will be the standard values most of the time. There are a few caveats here and there, but basically, you know, if you would go and, so maybe you look here for Patricia's example, we've got 1,050 square feet of exterior wall. Well, what code says is a U value of 0.06. Well, we're going to build a little better wall, right? The higher the R, the better, the lower the U, the better. So we're building a little better wall, 0.045, but we're using a little worse window because the higher the U, so it's a little worse window, a little better door, exact same roof. And basically you add the assembly, the area of the assembly, that 1,050 square feet, and it's all about, you can see the math down here, right? And you get basically what I would call it's like a U score. And the standard is 284.5 based on these values here. And as long as you're below 284.5 with your proposed design, then you're code compliant. And it's a little discomforting. I mean, one nice thing about the energy code, it is so super flexible. There's a million ways through it. Ultimately, there's a million different trade-offs or things that you could utilize. You know, it doesn't always feel quite right because we all know windows aren't as efficient as walls, right? Well, if you simply, you know, you could have worse walls, but then a whole bunch of windows that were a little better than code and still meet code. But what would happen to this UA standard? This UA standard number would bump up to 1,000. So it's going to allow you to have a whole lot less efficient building thermal envelope. It's going to set the bar a whole lot higher because if you have a whole lot more square footage of windows, because that look how much higher that U value is in window versus wall. it can be super confusing. You know, I joke, I can make a home comply with R1 in the walls as long as I have a whole bunch of real, you know, 80% of my walls are really efficient windows. You know, it would be a nightmare, but these numbers are real high. And again, let's not get too confused about this. You're going, the long story short of this, you use a calculator. You're going to show that the standard design is higher than the proposed design uses less energy or has a better thermal envelope than the standard design. Now, again, a little more flexibility. You know, back on the UA, it has nothing to do with energy cost or energy use. This is all just the U values of the building thermal envelope components. You get a baseline, you come below the baseline, you're good to go. These performance calculators, we're actually taking into account energy costs. So we will take that same standard and proposed design, right? And we will figure out the energy cost for the standard design, okay? And then as long as our proposed design, the house that we propose to build uses less energy, then you meet code, you're code compliant, and that's under the performance section of the code, or R405. Quite a bit more flexibility. Again, this isn't something you're going to be calculating out on a bar napkin at happy hour. You will need a code compliance calculator to calculate all this out. I'm pretty sure this is all based on the the heat transfer based out of the ASHRAE handbook of fundamentals. But IC3, that comes out of Texas A&M University. That is a free calculator. It takes, the first time you do a house in the IC3 calculator might take you 45 minutes to an hour. Let's say on a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,500 square foot, fairly simple house. Might take you 45 minutes to an hour to put in that calculator. Once you get good at it, I was doing them. I had a little side business way back in the day doing permit compliance paperwork for folks. And I could do a house in about 20 minutes. It gets real simple, real quick. And if a builder has an in-house drafting and they can just click, click, click and have all your wall areas and window areas, you could probably do it in 15 minutes. So this is not a long drawn out calculation process. It's a pretty simple code compliance calculator. Ecotrope, certainly a little more bells and whistles. You're typically, you know, Ecotrope's going to take a whole lot more inputs than IC3. Typically, it's not always the case. IC3 does have an ERI path as well, or they at least did with the 2015. I don't know for sure if they're planning on that with the 2021 or not. Energy rating index. So this is the final compliance path, which is R406. Again, more flexibility. You can get credit for all sorts of things. And a nice thing about this, throw some solar on there or a windmill in your backyard, and you get that will lower your ERI score as well. So it's an ERI score. Basically, the way that works is, you know, we talked about prescriptive values. Well, the 2006 energy code for climate zone 2, the prescriptive value was R13 wall. I think it was an R30 ceiling already, but the ERI is based on, so it's the lower the better. A 0 on an ERI would be a net zero house. You're not, for the year, you're not buying any energy off the grid. And 100 would be a house built to the prescriptive requirements of the 2006 energy code. So an ERI of 50 would conceivably be 50% more efficient than a house built to the 2006. So it's hers and not hers. Like we mentioned earlier, it is an ANSI standard. And so it's on a continuous update process. Brett Dillon, if you're really wanting to get into the weeds on the difference between ERI and her score, we have about an 1.5 hour video on Spear's YouTube channel, where really one of the sharper building science guys I know, Brett Dillon, who sat on ResNet's board when this was developed. I mean, so he knows the nuts and bolts and the background of it, probably as, him and Philip Ferry, and just as well as about 2 or 3 other people on the planet. He really knows what he's talking about. So any building science nerds or energy code raters that really want to get into the weeds, I highly recommend that ERI, HERS breakdown on our YouTube channel. And that'll really take you into any as deep as you ever would want to go. So back in all the other iterations of the code, certainly the 09, the 12, the 15, and the 18 code, there would be little parentheses next to code requirements telling you if it's prescriptive. So those were only applicable if you were following the prescriptive path, or there would be a little parentheses that said mandatory. So those handful, 12, 13 items were mandatory regardless of compliance path. Well, they've changed up the layout of the code, so to speak. You will no longer see the word mandatory in parentheses next to code sections. But what you will find is there's a prescriptive section that starts it. And then so table 405, so this is the beginning of the performance path. In table 406, this is the beginning of the ERI path. And basically, I thought I was going to scroll on that table. Basically what this is, hey, these are what used to be called mandatory items. Now they're just called requirements for this path. And it's the same old stuff. It's, hey, you have to have more, well, not same old, because this additional energy efficiency was new in the 2021, and we'll talk about what exactly that means in a minute. But the certificate, that's what I mentioned. I submitted a code change proposal about. That's just the certificate that goes in your electric panel. Vapor retarder, eave baffles, attic access hatches and doors. This stuff cannot be traded off. Whether you're doing ERI, and you'll notice this is just a carbon copy from the left and the right? And it's basically, hey, either whether you're doing performance or ERI, there's a handful of things that are requirements. They used to be called mandatory. Never forget the fine print. This is one particular amendment that Austin incorporated into the code, that why the national code compliance body, and Patricia, please try to get something like this in the 2024, because man, give me the utility bill to pay on a house that's got R25 at the roof deck, that's foamed at the roof deck of R25 rather than R38 blown all day long. It's just going to perform better. I like paying lower utility bills. I know I so wish my house was built to this. My utility bill was $487 last month. And it's not big. This house built to Austin's 2021 energy code as amended, I would guess probably be about $140 or $160 a month. So that'll pay for itself pretty quickly, right? But these footnotes, so this air, I love this one. Hey, air impermeable insulation of R25 or greater. So basically, when you're doing that 7 inches of foam at the roof deck, which automatically is going to get your mechanical equipment and air distribution system inside the building thermal envelope, unless you just got a crazy design. So footnotes and exceptions, hey, insulation, you have to insulate your ducts. They have to be R8, but there's always exceptions. Always read the footnotes, always read the exceptions. You'll look at the table and there'll be a little bitty, A, B, or C, or whatever it is, and then go back and look at the footnotes, read the fine prints on the exception. I like this amendment as well. For a lot of builders like using the R6. And that is only allowed in Austin if you do a 15 SEER or higher. And that, even if you were following, if I'm not mistaken, that would also apply to the performance path as well. Whereas a lot of times in climate zone 2, builders will trade off that R8 duct insulation for R6. Now with the 2021, that trade-off is no longer allowed. In the table, that R8 minimum is required. But Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong, the Austin amendments, does it still allow the reduction to R6 with a 15 SEER or higher? in the performance?
No, we removed this exception since the published code did a great job.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, so that the 2021 took care of this. That is no longer the exception. So you're basically ducts outside the building thermal envelope are going to be R8, regardless of compliance path in the 2021. So some of the remaining chapters, chapter 5, that has to do with the existing buildings. That's another thing I like that Austin did. That they're a little more lenient on the wall requirements on an existing building. I mean, a lot of times if you're just exposing the insulation, how do you add continuous insulation? Anyway, it's a little more reasonable. The existing buildings are it's such a challenge. The way it's written in the code is almost impossible to enforce in reality, especially with, you take where I was building official in Granbury, 120-year-old historic building in downtown Granbury, to make them significantly change the aesthetics of it because of a minor modification in energy use. It seems to be a bit onerous. Austin gives you a little bit of a break on some of that existing building. Chapter 6, simply where they reference, what are the reference standards, for blower door and duct testing, ANSI 301 or ICC 301, 380 is referenced. The climate zone map, those will be your reference standards in chapter 6. And then Austin, rather than having the solar ready appendices that doesn't get adopted, and because appendices in the code aren't adopted unless they're adopted specifically, Austin actually included a handful of the solar ready in the chapter 7, and that was adopted per ordinance. And we'll look at that here in just a second too. So here's just a brief summary of the changes residential. So this is a handy little chart. If you look at the majority of them, this big green box, almost 60% just administrative, changing a dot and an I, crossing a T, taking out mandatory, moving it to the table, et cetera, stuff that really doesn't affect how you build homes administratively, not much. 17% of them actually decrease the energy use in a home. Those are the things we're happy to have, right? These are good things. In PNNL, these aren't things that, contrary to some of NAHB or LBA or contrary to some of the builder hyperbole surrounding some of these code changes, there is nothing in here that has 100-year payback, I can assure you. The Pacific Northwest National Lab does all the calculations. It's all shown to pay for itself well within the useful life of a building. And they consider the useful life of a building to be 30 years. And we all hope, if you build them right, it should be several hundred years. They're actually, so Patricia breaks this down, 10% of them aren't applicable to Austin at all, probably like some snow melt stuff, although Snowmageddon maybe made us rethink some of that. Minimal energy impact, 12%. And there are a couple that actually supposedly increased energy use, but when we look at them, I would argue that maybe that's just not necessarily true. And then you'll notice you will get a hyperlink here on this slide with the where you can access for free the 2021 IECC is published. So here's just a list of all of the administrative changes. And again, editorial changes to air sealing table, electric readiness. I'm not sure why that's in red, but total effective R value of buried ducts. So it's just some administrative, some clarification type changes in the code. That's the vast majority of the code changes. Minimal impact. Yeah, go ahead.
The 4 or 5 items that are in red, those are the ones that went to appeal and then were removed from.
Oh, okay. That's
why I have.
And that ties back into how the standard in ICC changed the scope to actually be able to include some of these things going forward. And somebody asked me to back up. So again, you don't need to copy this down. You will get a PDF of this slide presentation, which will have this hyperlink on here. So no need to jot that down. You'll get a copy of it. If you registered for the webinar, which all of you on here did, you'll get a copy of this, you'll get a copy of the fact sheet, and you'll get a copy of the ordinance. So no worries there. Again, we already covered the minimal impacts. And then these actually decrease energy use, or decrease or increase. I mean, I don't know 100% EV charging or readiness. Oh, that's red. So it got taken out on appeal. That's right. Yeah. And so, you know, hot water heater efficiency, those are set by federal minimum. So the IECC felt they didn't, that wasn't part of their scope, but going forward, it will be, which again, another one of the reasons I think the 2024 will be our best energy code ever. In the 2024, the great thing about the 2024 moving to a standard, if we would have moved it to a standard back in the 2006 IECC, where that was the baseline, and then we moved it to a standard, well, then I would be on the same page as my efficiency folks and be kind of worried. But with the 2021 energy code as published is a fantastic baseline. I mean, you build a house. My house, like I said, was built in 97, almost a $500 electric bill. It would be probably 150 built to the 2021 as published or cheaper. So the 2021, that will be the baseline for the development of the 2024 and all the codes moving forward. I can't imagine the committee rolling back the efficiency. And this is kind of an interesting little graph. So this would be energy use, which 0 would be here. Like, you know, lots of cities have climate goals of net zero by 2030. I think California, all new residential construction by 2030 has got to be net zero. They might have even bumped it up to 2025, but so this is the efficiency of the code over time. You'll notice from the 06 to the 09 was about an 8% jump in efficiency. And then there was a big jump from the 09 to the 12 with about a 12% jump in efficiency. The blower door test requirements that came into the 12 were driving a large part of that. There was also increased wall and ceiling insulation at the same time. A big drive in the 2009 efficiency gain was the duct testing requirement came in the 09. But then you see the 2012, the 2015, the 2018, all almost identical as far as efficiency. The 18 about 1% more efficient. But then you see the 2021 and boom, we get another 6, 7, 8, 9% gain. PNL just came out right about 9% or so on average. They calculated in a variety of different ways. ResCheck was supposed to be ready this spring. I'm actually on a committee, like a troubleshooting committee for ResCheck. So I will get the first version of ResCheck before it hits the streets. And I was supposed to have it 6 months ago and I still don't have it. So there's evidently a hiccup in the ResCheck calculator that hopefully will be resolved soon. And then ComCheck hopefully will be here shortly thereafter here in this fall. So some of the interesting prescriptive changes in the code, again, these can be traded off in the performance and the ERI path, you know, at least to a point. If you have a question, if you'll type it in on the Q&A panel or the Q&A panel or the chat, either one, Ben, just type those in and we'll answer them. We increased the ceiling value from R38 to R49. And that's also effective in climate zone 3 as well. So our neighbors, Dallas-Fort Worth area as well. That's one of those administrative changes for CI. That's not all that significant. A new option for basically continuous insulation only. I mean, continuous insulation is always a great option because it stops, you know, a 3.5-inch 2x4 has an R value of about 3.5. Wood is about R1 per inch. Well, 3.5 inches of fiberglass has an R value of R13 to 15. So it's, you know, 4 or 5 times more efficient. Well, so basically, you know, where we would require an R15 wall in climate zone 2 or as published, as the code was published, we would require an R13 wall. Well, an R10 continuous over the exterior of the framing members doesn't specify exterior. I guess you can conceivably put it on the interior, but typically it's incorporated into your weather resistant barrier. But you can do a continuous insulation option only as well. So that's brought in to the code. What do I recommend for house wrap or WRB? I'm a huge fan of Tyvek. I think Tyvek, the science behind Tyvek is an absolute home run. I've seen it tested. I'm a firm believer in Tyvek. I think the Zip system works pretty well. And Zip's got a real nice, that they have a continuous insulation built in. I'm a little leery of any product where the seams have to be taped in the field, just because tape inherently doesn't stick on dusty things. And construction sites, especially in July and August in Texas, are inherently dusty. And you show me a framer back rolling tape like the manufacturer's installation instructions say after cleaning the substrate before he taped it. It's just, I think there's a whole lot more room for error, but installed correctly, huge fan of the Zip system. That woven or that perforated builder wrap, anytime you see a builder's name on it, not a big fan of that for a weather resistant barrier at all. And there are some foams, the Foamular, I know Owens Corning has one. There's a handful of polyiso, just 4x8 sheet foam manufacturers that the foam facing qualifies as a weather resistant barrier. I can tell you what I don't like as a weather resistant barrier, and that's cardboard, AKA T-ply, not a huge fan. If you look at the manufacturer's installation instructions for T-ply, you have to install it just right for it to maintain its weather resistant barrier status. And that's as far as resiliency goes, weather resistant barrier is super important. And we'll get to the hot water heater here in just a second there, Brad. Let's see. Yeah, and we already covered the rest of that slide, so let's keep going here. So this is the 2015 Austin Energy Code. We had to have an R15+2 or an R13+3. So that was already more aggressive, or an R19. Then the published code was just a R13. So good for Austin there. Austin is basically leaving the wall the same, but they have added a an R15 continuous insulation option. Here's what I like. Well, here's what I like a lot is that R20 continuous insulation. Fantastic. I mean, I know there for a while, builders couldn't get radiant barrier decking at all. Shoot, 2 inches or 4 inches of continuous insulation above the roof rafters. You stop all that thermal bridging through your rafters. You have a good, solid, completely continuous insulated path. That R20 continuous will perform every bit as well, considering you're getting your mechanicals in conditioned space, will perform every bit as well or better than that R49. But again, the gist is the ceiling went from R38 to R49. Austin was smart in giving you, I consider this my spray foam option, and then just the all my insulation above the roof rafter option. Both great options. The code gets a little pickier about baffles in the 2021. We're going to be putting them in every rafter cavity from now on. And if you've got to, and this was always been, and I've sent off to ICC for an interpretation on the baffle requirements, so I can get in the weeds with this with you if you want. But if I'm an inspector, I don't want to see a 10-inch baffle and 24-inch rafter cavity, because you're going to get the wind washing of your blown insulation up off the top plate and down into the soffit. This is a performance-based requirement. This is a requirement in the code so that when you blow this insulation on here, it stays the full depth as intended over the ceiling, and your ventilation goes up above the insulation and does not hamper it. I love this one. This is new in the 2021. You're actually allowed to use, so typically we have our pull down stairs in the garage, and it doesn't matter. They don't have to be insulated if they're in the garage, right? Because it's not in conditioned space. But if you do have pull down stairs in the thermal envelope, you've got them in a hallway or whatever, the 12, 15, and 18 code said it had to be insulated equal to the surrounding area. So you're looking at an R38. So you're doing some sort of zip off or an attic tent of some sort, or you're field fabricating some sort of duct board, or it's some sort of contraption that is likely to be removed, not get sealed back well, or I just thought there were a lot of opportunities for it to fail. Well, this entire assembly right here is rated at an R10. It's not that much more expensive than just a cheap builder grade pull down stair. I know Marwin Manufacturers One. Marwin's made in Texas. Hey, support a Texas company. That's always a good thing. No matter what it is, we need to weather strip. So where this door goes, and the weather stripping is part of this product as well. But whether it's a removable access hatch or a pull down stair, it will need to be weather stripped. Now, if it's not this R10 assembly, it does still need to be insulated to the same area adjacent to the attic insulation. Air sealing, electrical and communication outlet boxes. To me, this was already in the code. The 2021 specifically calls out a NEMA OS 4. I'm running a little bit behind on time. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this. Basically, you've got to air seal your boxes on that penetrate the building thermal envelope, or you can use a NEMA OS 4 air sealed box. There's a handful of, if you notice the blue here, so the new ICC codes, they have blue on the changes. So basically it just gives you a little more direction as far as, I always say, if you pass your blower door and duct blaster tests and so this is a 1-page table out of the energy code. If you follow this table and pass your test, you're 95% of the way to meeting code. I mean, it's really, it breaks it all down: ceiling, walls, rim joists, basement crawl space, and it talks about how your air barrier has to be constructed and how your insulation has to be installed. And so you can see there are a handful of changes in that table. We're not going to get into the weeds just because we are running a little bit behind on time. I tend to be a little mouthy. This is super handy for Austin, especially where you're having a lot of smaller dwellings being built. It's just so expensive to live there. We can't afford to build very big houses, right? Well, it was always blower door tests and HER scores always wrongly penalize smaller dwellings. I mean, if we're talking about saving energy, a smaller dwelling is going to save energy over McMansion, right? But they were frankly penalized by the way that the blower door, the calculation had to be done. Well, now it goes from 0.28 CFM a square foot to 0.30. In other words, you can change the math just a little bit on how you do your calculation for dwellings less than or equal to 1,500 square feet. The ResNet 380, this came in 2018, but it's the reference standard for duct leakage. That was already in Austin. This is a big change. Especially for the HERS raters on here, mechanical ventilation testing is now required in the 2021 energy code. And it got a little pickier, thank goodness, about the efficiency of the mechanical ventilation fans. Basically, we're going to get away from using that air handler to mechanically ventilate our houses. About time. Lighting changes. Long story short, everybody's putting in LEDs. It really doesn't matter. This takes care of itself. There are a couple of interesting lighting controls. So basically on the exterior, you're going to need daylight controls. It used to drive me crazy, especially when I knew they were halogens. But my neighbor with the 42 up lights on their house that stayed on 24/7, no longer. The exterior, you will have, when the sun is out, your exterior lighting needs to be off. On the interior, I got a kind of a funny little joke about this. Motion sensor controls in the bedroom, probably not the greatest idea. So we'll be putting dimmers in bedrooms from now on. So there are, other than hallways, lights for safety and exterior lighting in bathrooms, all interior lighting, so all your game rooms, your bedrooms, your studies, all of that will either need to be occupancy censored or on a dimmer, which the great thing about LEDs, if you dimmed it in incandescent to half the lighting, it still drew like 90% of the wattage. Whereas if you dim a LED to 50% of the lighting output, it actually draws 50% of the electricity. So that's pretty handy. This gets a little technical, but basically what it allows when you're doing your ERI, basically this is incorporated into the standard reference table. If you have more centrally located hot water heating with shorter runs to the fixtures that use the hot water, you get a little bump in your performance or your ERI path. And that is now included in the standard reference table. So there are 1 of 5 additional efficiency option packages required with the 2021. Basically, if you're using the UA, you can basically have a better envelope. Your envelope can be, and the math doesn't come out perfectly this way, but just for ease of saying it, your envelope can be 5% better than code. You can have more efficient HVAC equipment. Now, if you're looking at heat pump, to get to this 10 HSPF right now, the lowest SEER rating you can find to get you there is a 20 SEER. That's probably going to be a little pricey. We're not doing a lot of ground source heat pumps in Texas. You know, whisper about, there's a handful. You can certainly do that. This gas furnace with the 16 SEER would be a pretty, 95% gas with the 16 SEER would probably be a fairly significant option. I think for builders, this would probably be the cheapest. This would be a fairly good option. This would be good if you're building your forever home and you're wanting to start off with a real high SEER AC. This is probably what I would go with were I a builder, just because so a heat pump water heater, this right here, for a family of 4 is going to cost you a little under $300 a year to run. A standard water heater that 99 out of 100 homes have in Texas, standard electric resistance water heater, about $620 a month for a family of 4 in a 2,500 square foot home. So if I can save a year, if I can save $300 a year, and a lot of times I know Austin Energy used to have rebates for heat pump water heaters. I think they still might. If I can get a rebate from my utility and I can use it as my additional efficiency compliance path. So basically what this says is tankless gas or propane, this 2.0 efficiency factor for electric water heater, that's heat pump water heaters. You will not find a strip electric resistance water heater that meets that, or solar water heating. So basically more efficient water heating. And then the 2 more, get our ducts in conditioned space, or rather than 5 air changes an hour, we get down to 3 air changes an hour, and we put in an ERV that's got at least 50% latent recovery. And that might be a good option. Keep it a little more comfortable in the house, because you can remove some of that moisture in the home with an ERV. So that might be a good option as well. So there are some added backstops to the performance path. So basically, you know, if you're going to go the performance path, yeah, you can trade a lot of things off, but you can't trade it below these requirements. On the ERI, same thing as well. And you know, who would do this? No one. But you could conceivably with ERI, crummy walls, crummy insulation, just throw a whole bunch of solar and a windmill in the backyard, and then you meet code. Well, we have some building thermal envelope backstops as well with the ERI path. And additionally, there is a 5% cap as far as if you're going to use ERI, you can't just use renewables out the yin yang to get to exactly where you need to be. Let me move this table. It keeps getting in my way. Lower ERI targets for compliance. So we've lowered the ERI target for compliance, and I can't see what that number is because I got something in my way. More Austin amendments. So we just carried a few forward. The footnotes for the attic roof line insulation, we already talked about that. Remove the gas portion of the code because of the legislation. I know we already had a question about that, but we did retain the timer requirement for electric resistance water heating. So if you got to put a timer on it, I mean, by the time you do all that, put in a heat pump water heater, but there is a timer requirement for electric resistance water heating. The ERI remains at 59. And again, we'll look at the solar ready provisions coming here in just a second. So ESL has, so what's next in the code, and I apologize, I'll be done here in just 2 minutes. ESL has provided the stringency analysis to our State Energy Conservation Office. State Energy Conservation Office is performing stakeholder engagement either already or shortly. My understanding that we need to work through House Bill 2419. Council for Seco's found some problems with it and moving in the energy code forward. So I'm thinking 2023 probably would be the very earliest for state adoption, but starting Wednesday, it is effective in Austin, effective September 1st, 2021. We already talked about the rest of that. And there will be additional training opportunities from the coming up. Hopefully we can get some field training. All right, with that, and you have Patricia and my contact information there. Let's look at, yes, on a circulation pump on a water heater, it will have to be controlled. That carried forward in the 2021. Let's see. Will you be covering the Austin Amendment for gas water heaters when gas is available for residential? It does not appear to be in the updated amendments. I have a project trying to permit during the code conversion and they need to confirm. Can you speak to that a little bit, Patricia? You mentioned it earlier. I know you're more familiar with that than I am. Oh, she's going to answer it live.
Yeah. So if you're in going for permit, the intake personnel, as I understand it, are going to do their due diligence to make sure you're stamped on the appropriate date that you get it. They've issued some instructions about emailing to get the date stamp on the email and different things. So whichever date you lie on. So if you actually get stamped Wednesday or after, so that you're applied to the 2021 codes, then this 2021 gas requirement are not there anymore, now applies. So gas, previously electric resistance water heating was banned when gas was in the right of way to encourage gas as a demand response strategy. We've removed that gas requirement. Excuse me. So you can put electric resistance water heating in your project, regardless if gas is in your right of way or not. But you do need to make sure that there is a timer on the water heater according to that timing in the code language. You can have an exception if there's a demand response technology integrated into the water heater. Those are newer things these days. Those are more advanced technologies, so that would supersede the timer. Or if you're doing a heat pump water heater, which at this time is a little bit easier on single family than on multifamily, but there are lots of people piloting different ways to do heat pump water heater technology for multifamily projects. So it really depends when you get your permit, what your date stamp is, so that you know what code you're going to be under. Does that answer your question, Brad?
I can't imagine it not. That was pretty thorough. So Thomas wants to know about anything specific mechanical requirements tied to spray foam. And since it's been over a decade since you could have an 80% furnace inside the combusting air inside the building thermal envelope. My interpretation of the code, a fully foam encapsulated home, whether it be new construction or in a retrofit environment, you cannot have an 80% furnace. You would need to frame that out. You would need to thermally isolate that furnace and isolate and bring in fresh air for that furnace. Do you know of any specific additional? That's always been in the code. If you're an inspector and you're seeing a retrofit on spray foam and they're bringing in an 80% furnace, that's a red tag. That's a life safety issue to me. That's not, you can't do that. Patricia, do you have any other additional mechanical requirements tied to spray foam?
It'll go back to the mechanical code. So it's really difficult in a retrofit situation lots of times because it's harder to know that you have all the combustion air, but as long as you have all the combustion air and fresh air that it's required, then that's how it is. That's what it says in the code.
Oh yeah, yep, you're right. Because climate zone 2, it's actually exempt in climate zone 2. My brain thinks climate zone 3 is my default, and actually in climate zone 3, you have to thermally isolate it, but in climate zone 2, you do not. It's exactly right. Yeah, I guess the idea is that it's not running long enough, often enough, but I think Snowmageddon would maybe make us rethink that.
It's a really dumb idea. I mean, to keep that 80%.
Stupid idea. Yeah, I
It's
don't
insane
like
for life and safety, but for the items in the code, as long as enough. Yeah, so there's nothing that ties the code specifically, like the spray foam, because we don't call out spray foam, even when we say that now the R25 was always there, but it says, it gives the specifications by which that installation is allowed, which if you put, go 2 steps further in the chess game, you can see that that's pretty much the only spray foam.
Yeah.
But we never call out specific products like that. So we try to only specify specifications by which that people need to follow the code.
Right. Yeah, you can't, you got to stay away from specific products, which I didn't do a very good job earlier, which somebody pointed out to me in the chat.
No, but in the code, you can't say, there'll be one industry upset with another industry if you start doing that. So,
right.
So in the mechanical code, it doesn't specifically say anything about spray foam. It just says that when it's your, what does it say exactly? Something about in the thermal envelope or something like that, that you just have to make sure that you have enough combustion air.
Combustion air. Yeah, I forgot that was actually that isolation was exempt in climate zone 2, which is kind of crazy to me, but I can kind of see both sides. But if in a foam encapsulation situation, I mean, if you have enough fresh air, that's bringing that fresh air inside your building thermal envelope. So I think I could probably find a way in the code to keep that from happening, and have a pretty good background. I mean, I just that.
Yeah. The thing is they're supposed to show you the calculations. The code has all the calculations that you're supposed to do.
Right.
People are supposed to be doing math to prove out that they're okay. Supposed to.
Okay, well, we'll do one more. We got time for one. I know, apologize, we're a little late here. But I think the most important question, and I'm going to leave this for you, Patricia. Daniel wants to know, so what happens on Wednesday when I submit for a permit?
Yeah, the same kind of thing. Then you'll get tagged September 1st and 2021 codes will apply to you. Now, as I understand it, if you're a production builder and you already have a volume builder permit where the city has already reviewed all of your plans, and then it's kind of just an easy way to get your building permits later on once you know you have those starts coming up. You'll still be on the 15 for those building permits under that volume builder permit. But once you move to your next section or phase or however your subdivision is laid out, you'll be moving to the 2021 code set.
Okay.
Give some leeway to some of the people here, the production builders. And IC3 should be available in September. I just spoke with them a little over a week ago, and that's what they were telling me. So that will be available for people to determine that they're still in compliance. The main thing that's popping up in the 2021 IC3 for Austin is that 49 in the attic and the additional energy efficiency option package, being able to define what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, that's really the two main deals. I mean, you just do that additional efficiency and blow R49 and you're probably good to go at least for a little bit. And Brad asked about the ELR calculation. They did add a definition in the 2021, Brad, that covers how to define the envelope. I don't have that pulled up right now, and we're already 16 minutes over, so I'm not going to find it and read it to you. But just so you know, I mean, that hyperlink that'll take you to the 2021, look in the definitions chapter, and it does define the envelope and how you do that calculation. Well, I hate to, sorry, I knew I was going to be a little long, Patricia. I always am when I'm talking. I apologize for keeping everybody for an extra 15 minutes. Just, hey, y'all clock out 15 minutes early today and go home 15 minutes early. Let your boss know I said it was okay.
And I'll put in the chat real quick the link to the fact sheet that that I developed that you guys can reference. I believe it's supposed to be available on yeah, there it is too. But what's it say? So I believe they're going to be posting it to social media today or tomorrow as well. But yeah, you can click on that link there. They'll get you to the fact sheets, front and back, kind of highlights everything Jason just told you today.
That's right here.
Yeah, and then as always, you can email me directly, patricia.chawla@austinenergy.com, or we created this new email address, energycode@austinenergy.com, that you can use. And Jason is always very delightful in answering questions as well. So I'm volunteering you to be able to email him as well.
No, feel free to email me. I love code questions. That's part of what they pay me for. And again, you will get a copy of the fact sheet, a copy of the presentation, and a copy of the ordinance with, and the PDF of the presentation will have all those hyperlinks in it you need. So you should get everything you need, probably no later than tomorrow. She's usually pretty quick, so you might even get it this afternoon, but certainly no later than tomorrow, you'll get a copy of everything. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks so much, Patricia. I'll give you the final word.
I was just going to say thank you too. So yeah, let us know if you have questions, and have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. I lied about giving you the final word, huh?